The only way to build wealth is through concentration. We want to be the most helpful investor in your cap table. If not top three, we'll survive and live with that. If you find a good quest,
the right mission,
it ends up making these things actually a lot easier because they end up being rallying points. Venture is an apprenticeship business. And one of the big ways to be successful and to win in this game is you definitely need to embrace mentorship and make sure that you're in an environment that's giving you that. I think it is the most unproductive thing for our economy to just mimetically concentrate in San Francisco, New York, and LA.
Christian Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thanks
We
for
the
having me.
Builders. We're at Reindustrialize in Detroit. What an interesting experience.
It has been.
When you look around in the city, see the architecture, you see everything, do you see like traces of like once, great sort of economy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's so many images. It's interesting seeing like just of the old auto industry. I mean, that is very real. Like you can't lose, and that's why it's in ways cool that the Reindustrialize conference is here, because it's a relic of losing an industry that is critically important, not just to the automotive industry we lost, right, but all of the indirect jobs that were tied to that supply chain, all the manufacturing capacity and know-how and capability. Losing that for a nation is a terrible thing. And you realize how important that is from a national security perspective. And I think there was a while where it was easy for all of us to forget that and not really see that and understand that. And so the Reindustrialize movement that's happening across the entire West is it's sobering to be reminded and be here and see like why it's so important. And we're investors in a company called Apply Intuition, and the two founders, Casser and Peter.
I had Kasser on, actually.
Yeah, he's incredible,
Yeah.
and so is Peter. And the company's a really great company, and they talk a lot about growing up in Detroit and families that were in the automotive industry and seeing that be lost, and it drives their mission to build software to empower the automotive industry, which is critical to the West. And so, I mean, I can keep ranting on this, but I think it's really important to come see, and it's a good reminder for kind of a lot of the investments that the technology industry is making, that governments are making, and that capital is making to bring some of this capacity back to the entire West, not just the US.
Your day job is with 137 Ventures. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role? And let's do a formal intro.
Yeah.
And you're also the co-founder of Hill and Valley Forum.
Yes. Yeah. So 137 Ventures, we are a investment firm investing in high growth technology businesses. We want to build large positions and in generational technology companies and their founders. We got started about 15 years ago with a bet that companies are going to stay private longer, and have built a platform to partner with companies across that entire growth life cycle. We've had the good fortune of investing in some pretty transformative businesses, being major shareholders in SpaceX and Anduril, but we were also longtime investors in Palantir, Spotify, Airbnb, SolarCity, Uber, and continue to try to not just continually invest and partner with the businesses that we've had the relationships with for 5, 10, 15 years, but hopefully find the next sets of ones. And then the Hill and Valley Forum stemmed from my personal friendships with Jacob Hellberg, who was former Palantir and is the Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, or coming into the admin for that, and then Delian Esperhoof, who's partner at Founders Fund and co-founder of Arda. And it was an idea that we had, just kind of riffing on something that should exist that didn't exist. And I thought it was going to be a sort of small dinner with leaders in the tech industry and some policymakers in Congress in specific. And Jacob had much more grand aspirations. And the first event, I think, was 100 people. And this past year, I think we had like 700 people or something like that.
God. Okay.
It's become a bit of a monstrosity in a good way. And I think it's been very special about how uniting and bipartisan it is. And I always say it's not just a uniting bipartisan topic and event in DC, but it's actually in Silicon Valley, right? It's a firm where you have Sequoia, Founders Fund, Lightspeed, us,
Khosla,
Lux, Khosla, Palantir, Ramp, Apply Intuition, all these companies who are partners with us and supporters, like coming together, speaking together. You had OpenAI and Anthropic, right? Leadership speaking at the same time, and like supportive of that. So although all these people compete in Silicon Valley with each other, they compete with each other in Capitol Hill, it's really cool to have events and subjects that bring people together. And national security, leading America and the West and our allies leading in technology and industry is a uniting topic. And the Reindustrialize conference is a symbol of that as well.
You joined 137 Ventures in 2019, and now you're a partner, which is, I would say, a very accelerated rise. What have you mentioned in a podcast that it was the right environment, for you to grow.
Yeah.
What have you learned about talent building from the environment you got at
it's a great question. So I can give a point on just what's unique about our firm and what was a big blessing for me, and then what was unique in my life, and then maybe that's applicable. I think for our firm, the firm has adopted the very same mindset and philosophy that stems from the PayPal network and Peter. In fact, Peter Thiel, did the exact same thing with my partners, right, who are co-founders when they were younger, right? Mm-hmm. Give a ton of autonomy to smart young people from different backgrounds, and let them succeed, let them fail, and give them more room as they earn more trust. Yeah. And you could earn as much trust and leeway as anyone, and your opinion could be just as valuable as anyone's, and your idea could be just as valuable as anyone's, and you could be better than someone that's 10 years older or more senior. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very flat org dynamic, and that's really valuable. I was given way more autonomy and responsibility than I probably deserved. At the same time, they're very thoughtful, and I think what's unique at 137 in particular is we're very thoughtful about how we also invest and train talent. So it's not just full autonomy and responsibility to prove yourself and develop, but there's also a very targeted and specific strategy that we run in how we develop talent and develop skill sets in particular. These skill sets are kind of baseline. Like if you want to be a successful investor, you kind of have to have certain skill sets, especially where we are in growth. The alpha comes from the other things, but we're very good at giving room to kind of grow. And if you look, there's only 4 of us partners. Nick and I are non-founding partners, and we both started as junior hires, by both joined instead of going to business school. Our principal started as an analyst, our associate started as an analyst. And so I think, you see that continual DNA, and that's something that, we will replicate, and I look to replicate with the next generation as we grow as a firm. Where I got unique, I think I was right place, right time, recipient of really great timing, got a lot of credibility really young and really early, which is a consistent thing when you get luck, I guess, is a word that people aren't supposed to use, but you get fortunate to be in the right place, right time. You get credibility, right? And more opportunity. And I also think that I really was the recipient of not just great upbringing, great family, great opportunity that I was blessed that most people don't get, but I had great mentors, and I think that's a big unlock in my life, and something that I think everyone should try to find. It's not easy. I've got very lucky in my dynamic, but I can't stress the importance of having people that you look up to, and get wisdom from, that open opportunities and doors for you, and that pour into your life across your entire life too. Yeah. I think also I've maybe at times stressed and focused on mentors in my career, but you need mentors in your personal life as well, right? You need mentors across other aspects of who you are, because they all very much matter. And I know I did a seasonal life where I just cared about work, and neglecting other things in your life is not a strategy for success either.
So there are 2 models in venture. There's the apprenticeship, bring up the analyst, and there's like many doors for them, within the firm, and that they can climb. And the other is, that ex-operator sort of, which was in the beginning days what Andreessen used, bring them in as partners. Was this more like the apprenticeship sort of model? Did you feel you got that sort of apprenticeship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got that from within the firm, outside the firm. Venture is an apprenticeship business. Yeah. Keith Raboy has a lot of great nuggets of wisdom and insights around just talent development, talent spotting, and one of these things that he always talks about, which is very true, which is how venture is an apprenticeship business, and it's incredibly important, and that's just true. I think that's a critical thing for people to realize as they think about the game of venture, which I like to use that term, which is like everything you have to master, right? You have to learn the rules, you have to learn the competitive advantages, you learn your weaknesses, like everything is a game or the rule, and how do you win in that game? And one of the big ways to be successful and to win in this game is you definitely need to embrace mentorship and make sure that you're in an environment that's giving you that.
You mentioned you were lucky or fortunate to get that platform, right, where you earned credibility. How do you pursue the right opportunity that has the highest probability of earning you that credibility?
Yeah, I think the first.
So what did you do before 137?
Yeah. So, for me, I growing up, and I can just start, growing up, I had a passion for technology in the future. I was a gamer, so that's where I fell in love with technology. I grew up in the 90s, 2000s, and so I caught the internet wave, I caught the PC wave, MMORPGs and online gaming, console gaming. And so I built first computer as a kid to play RuneScape, which is a big MMORPG game, alongside World of Warcraft and StarCraft, and that led to obviously falling in love with sci-fi, fantasy novels and books. And then I read every futurist book as a kid, Kevin Kelly, Ray Kurzweil. So that was kind of my upbringing. I had a detour in life as an athlete, so I ended up playing college basketball at the University of Kansas, which is an incredible experience. Got to keep the bench warm for a lot of number one draft picks and NBA All-Stars. Actually, that experience in life was very special for me.
What did that teach you, that experience?
It taught me two big things. One was it taught me humility. I was, a D1 recruit at one point in high school, and like every kid, you have these dreams to win the NBA and kind of want to be the star, and you're looking up to all these people that are stars, and then you go and you're a recruited walk-on, and you're having to just get beat up all practice and yelled at and play defense for 4.5 hours and just do all this stuff, and you're lowest on the totem pole, right? And you learn to laugh at yourself, and you learn to take shit, and that was great. I really happy I learned at a young age. Most athletes don't learn that till later.
Does that build,
and a lot of people don't learn that till later.
Does that build thick skin?
Self-awareness. You can just laugh at things. You get to see a little bit of people's worst sides or their tough sides, or they're not always sucking up to you. And so you just deal with people's patience. You have patience with people to deal with them differently. It was awesome. So I'd say that was huge. And then the second was I fell in love. I became a Christian in college, and I fell in love with theology and philosophy and history then. A lot of the books and subject matters I'm obsessed with now that actually I think make me a great investor or better investor are things that I just studied in college vehemently on the side. So I'd say those two things were huge for me.
What had the biggest impact? An author, professor?
Someone
you looked up to in that era?
A couple. I for one, there's actually two books that greatly influenced me, which is really funny. Because one's obvious and one is somewhat strange that it did. So Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 obviously was a huge impact. And I'm picking things that kind of tie to my passions today, not just anything. And then the other book was actually Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, which is someone that I don't share a lot in common with from an economics perspective. But I thought it was an incredible book. Although I disagree with a lot of things and how I presented stuff, I thought it was great because there actually are really key nuggets in there. And it was one of the first books I read where I started to develop a passion for macro and economics. And it was a book that within that, I actually first got to read a book where I disagree with someone, but I found a lot of really good things that they pointed out. And it taught me that ability to find common ground with people all the time and to understand where people are coming from.
Interesting.
So I think those two things have been big driver, or at least hidden steers in my life that I didn't appreciate till later that were, obviously big and very impactful.
So I haven't read that book. Without if someone hasn't read that book, what part of that made you think about finding common ground, or taught you about finding common ground with people?
Well, I think you can see that you can agree with people on the problem, right? Like inequality in modern societies, income inequality, wage inequality. Like you can actually agree with this, or you can see like dynamics that happen where it's like they take the wrong interpretation, but what they're talking about is actually very interesting. I didn't think about. So one of the things that he talks a lot about is actually look through these cycles in Western societies, French society, English, American, but Western. That gap in income and wage inequality, it closed significantly during, but really post a war, which is like fascinating. You could take a lot of different things from that. And for me, it was like I went down a rabbit hole just understanding like how societies reset post these big structural shifts during terrible, tragic times of war. And it's also interesting to see if there's lessons learned from that. And it wasn't just myself, but my mentor Trey Stevens, a bunch of other folks. We actually did a study during COVID, and we studied a lot of writers who wrote around the Black Plague. Some were like Charles Spurgeon and kind of like folks on the theological side, and some were just more historians. And one of the interesting things was literally during the Black Plague, there was a moment at first where everyone came together. You're right about everyone came together because everyone shared everything in common, right? We were both in this fight together. And then slowly but surely, people started to realize that their neighbors were stuck in their houses, but their houses were nicer and they weren't dying as much. And then actually you had this breaking apart of the unity, and it was even worse than it was before. And it was like fascinating reading that, going through what was going on in COVID and just looking at like, will society follow the same trend? And so anyways, these are the things that like were fascinating. They taught me how to think. And that's why I think as an investor, our network especially, Peter's a philosopher. If you see, there's a constant focus on like having worldviews and how to think. And like many times, I think that skill set's even more important than maybe, and a skill set you should develop first before understanding technology or understanding how to write business models. Like that is a core foundational one. The latter, you can develop, you can learn, but that first one's very hard to develop.
I agree. But do you think school had anything to do with helping you develop that skill set?
I mean, I went to great schools growing up. So, I think that helped. Like I went to Harvard Westlake School for a large chunk of my childhood, and I took robotics courses as a kid and advanced. Like I think I was very fortunate to take really great courses. So, but like I wasn't serious about school.
This seems like pursuing your own, sort of interest.
I was a class clown, and then I became an athlete. So it's like a terrible mix, and a gamer, So like I wasn't like in love with school. I was forced to be studious and get good foundations. So that was great. And I was exposed to a lot. I fell in love with reading. Right. So like that I'm very grateful for that. But these were all passions. Like especially I was an athlete in college, right? So most of these were just my own passions, going down different rabbit holes. And I think those are things that are just like truly foundational. But circling back, after that period of time, started working and had a sort of knew I always wanted to end up as an investor. I had some family members that were really big inspirations in my life as successful
How does
investors.
one know you want to end up as an investor?
So I think it's threefold decision tree. I mentioned reading Peter's book, 0 to 1 was like a big inspiration for me kind of around this time period of graduating. I had a love of technology and was still a gamer, still passionate about the future. And so that was a place where I knew I wanted to be a part of. And then the third piece was I knew I wanted to invest and be a manager. And that was because I had two investors that were around me growing up, my grandfather and godfather, and they were larger than life figures, and they really showed me the impact that you can have as an investor. And so you combine all three of those, and I was like, I want to be a venture capitalist. I want to invest in technology companies. The advice I got was get some experience and go back to school and get your MBA. So I started out with the first step and quickly ended up meeting the team at 137 through the Founders Fund Network, actually, and joined and started going to business school. It's the best decision I ever made. And so most of my career has all been at the firm, so very much a homegrown product.
So you did not end up joining the business school?
No, skipped, yeah.
You skipped it, right. Okay, tell me more about what the influence your grandfather and godfather had on you. And I think like family does, or being around family who are in any particular profession, if you're someone who's had influence on you and is an Air Force pilot, you will grow up having a part of you will have that
Yes.
aspiration, right?
Yeah.
So how does that function now that
Yeah.
you look back?
Yeah. I think a couple of things. I think one, it was like one other piece of this combination of like why I love investing and building was, you know, they were extremely competitive, and there was a game that they mastered, right? And like
Right.
me as a gamer,
Yeah.
me as an athlete, and then really seeing that growing up, and then
Yeah.
and then really letting it kind of become a reality, I realized like this is so much fun. Like I want to figure out how to master the game of investing, because there's so many different games, right? There's markets, right? There's your own industry, right? There's trying to compete against others. There's ways that you have to be collaborative. Actually, how do you win? How do you figure out leverage, and not just leverage from a like capital markets finance standpoint, but how do you figure out leverage and opportunities and negotiations? And so like it was just very fascinating. And so that was a place where I was drawn. I'd say another piece is I saw that the things that they invested in, the things that they did, they impacted the world. Like they were in the built world, right? They changed people's lives. And you know, as an investor in technology companies at 137 Ventures, like we get to invest in these businesses that absolutely transform the American economy, that transform the world, that transform industry, that change the technology industry, and change people's lives within the company and within their customers. And so I think that is something that is just extremely fulfilling, and being able to back founders who really are these large in life figures who go build these companies is, I mean, I couldn't ask for more. And then the last thing was also like looking today, I have a very big passion for building bridges between Capitol Hill and Silicon Valley. And I think all governments in the West need to rekindle that relationship with technology and industry. And it's something that my grandfather and godfather were both also very passionate about. My grandfather, Bernard Garrett, Senior, he was very active in the civil rights movement as a successful entrepreneur in real estate and banking. Was a very good relationship with President Lyndon B. Johnson, and was a big voice for policy that could benefit and build wealth in the African American community. And I learned the lesson that if you're successful in industry, whether a founder or an investor, you should also go build those relationships in any form to inform policymakers about your industry, about your world, about your experience, and help them make good decisions.
That's very fascinating. How your mental model was that, like, to have the biggest impact probably across industries. Like, I'm rephrasing this, so you tell me if I'm right. You're uniquely suited to investing and then venture investing because of your love for technology, because that way you can scale impact, right? You don't, as opposed to a builder, which also could have been a path, right? You go build this one company for 15 years. But like, what was that? Because you've done both. If you read 0 to 1, it could have been, you could have very easily ended up on the other path, right?
I think I had too much intellectual curiosity and ADHD
to be on
to pick one. And as an athlete, as a gamer, seeing also just being around investing, so I kind of fell in love with the history of investing. I read books on other investors. I sort of got this like realization too of like how hard it is to go build a business. And, you know, this like, well, even if you had a good idea, that doesn't mean you're the person to go build it. So I think I lost a little bit of that like irrational confidence or expertise in one field. Like I just kind of self-selected out of that. Now, is it something that I absolutely would love to do if I get the opportunity or be a part of it? 100%. And if it's something where I am uniquely gifted to be a part of this and help put it together with some other people, that'd be awesome. But it's on that standpoint, I very much will always want to back the founders that are uniquely gifted to go do this stuff. That's where I'll always sit for sure.
You know, this generalist piece came out on Founders Fund, which was very interesting, where Peter talks about having your comparative advantage in a firm, or like just as a person, you know, to offer value.
It's a great article, by the way. Mario did awesome.
Incredible article.
It's awesome. I love the Founders Fund did that. He did forget to mention one of the first, if not the first, spin out of Founders Fund, but it's okay. Well, I'll forgive him for the no love for 137. So
maybe they'll need to do an edit.
We'll do an edit. We'll do an edit. Yeah, if Mario listens, we'll do an edit.
So in that, like, you know, I'm bringing this up because then you had the self-awareness to realize that, you know, you're too curious and you have a wide variety of interests. You're very competitive. That was one pillar, right? You're very competitive, and venture is competing like probably on a weekly basis in, you know, you're negotiating on a weekly basis, and it matters a lot. Like it's, potential impact is huge of those negotiations. What are some other things, like, I don't know if, like, maybe it's a hindsight, maybe now you think of it as a comparative advantage, but what are some things you were thinking about at the time, when, there was this MBA moment and you were getting introduced to the 137, and how did you meet the Founders Fund Network?
Yeah.
So
I actually first met Scott Nolan,
okay.
which is pretty funny. And then Scott's how I met Trey. The last firm I worked at early on, one of my first jobs, was an investment firm out in San Francisco. They were actually investors into 137 Ventures and also in the Founders Fund Network, and ended up meeting Justin through there. And Justin Fisher-Wolfson's my partner and our firm's co-founder. And we built a relationship over that summer. We bonded over SpaceX and poker. Which may actually summarize, like, if they write a book on Justin, it's probably gonna be SpaceX and poker, and that's Justin Fisher-Wolfson.
It all comes back to gaming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and then ended up convinced me to join instead of going to business school. I was very open to an opportunity. I kind of wanted one, but I was stuck on the, like, I probably should start applying to schools and go do this.
So poker is the comparative advantage.
Yeah, maybe. But it was like let me take a bet on myself and let me go be around hyper intelligent people I can learn a lot from. At the end of the day, like, early in my career, I had no career at this time, right? It's like, let me go learn as much as possible. Yeah. And I'm confident in myself that I'll be successful. So that was really the bet.
Where did that confidence, was it sports? Where did that, like, permissionlessness come from, that, I can just go do things?
I'm very obsessive and I like to move very fast. And I was very lucky through life experiences. I don't think this is all natural, to have a hyper awareness of my strengths and my weaknesses. And I am obsessive about turning weaknesses or fixing failures, but, like, turning weaknesses into strengths or fixing failures. And I know obviously the importance of doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on strengths. And I think that led to that dynamic of me being very confident that I'd be able to learn as much as possible, as fast as possible, and develop as fast as possible and move much faster than most folks. And so I think in ways I'm very lucky in how things have played out, and made partner in a short amount of time, and have been able to partner with some great companies and lead some great investments for us, and be a part of building the firm with my partners. I would say that, that at least is one piece heading into it that I can take some agency over, which is like that skill set has served me well. It's an area I probably need to apply to other areas of my life. So I think I over-index to, being hyper fixated on strengths and weaknesses and growth in career. And now I'm actually diversifying that a little bit to my personal life and to my own maturation, thinking about the skill sets that are needed to be a successful husband or father one day, which I am not now and not planning, but, like, in some super short term. But like, these are the things also that, like, you shouldn't neglect. And so I think that trait or skill set or awareness has proven me well. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. That doesn't mean I'm not I can run the list of all my failures, but I think it's helped me a lot when it comes to moving fast in work and making a bet on myself. And I think it's the same way, like, some people have certain personality traits or love what they do so much that they work a little harder and a little extra.
I think you got to give yourself more, you're being incredibly humble here, but you got to give yourself more credit for making that choice. It was like, I think at the time, probably going to work for Justin at 137, risk adjusted over an MBA, but still, it is a risk that not many people would take, and it takes agency, to take that risk where you're like, okay, I've decided that these people are hyper intelligent, and spending 6 months with them is probably a better decision than going off for 2 years and being 100%. In classrooms.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not, I think for some people business school is fantastic and you should do, and I had certain advantages and around timing and relationships that I had that obviously having a close relationship and someone that's been such a blessing in my life, like Trey Stevens, start a company called Anduril that kind of worked out pretty well, and being able to invest in that company, I was like, that's not replicable, and so many stories are like this, right? I mean, people just back to your point, we talked a little bit earlier about relationships before we started recording, right? And it's like, pretty much, if you look at every single successful person's story, or you ask someone in their story, there is a moment where someone did something for them that they just did not have to do, and someone took a liking to them for no other reason, like unclear.
Yeah,
right?
it's
like,
unclear.
Someone that gave them a job, hired them, gave them some advice, helped them out,
open a door,
consistent theme.
Yeah.
Every successful investor, consistent theme. And so, you just got to be aware of that and be grateful for when it happens, and let serendipity. For me, I think it's somewhat of divine guidance, intervention, and a blessing. But whether you call it fortune or serendipity, either way, you got to let that happen and let it play out in your life.
So what's the key to building and nurturing and maintaining these relationships?
I think the best. I think there's like two sides to this, because the most important relationships in your life are going to be relationships that are built on a good foundation, on something that's shared and real. And so whether that's work or not, like that's the most important thing, right? And so you can't manufacture that. And it could be built on something completely unrelated to work. Like I mentioned, one of my mentors, Trey Stevens, we bonded around a love first of Christianity and theology, philosophy, and sports. Like technology and work was like the last thing. Trey still hates talking to me about technology and work. So I know I'm like stealing precious time if I want to talk to him about work. So that's something that's very, very critical and important. And so I think, that's one piece, is just like there's an organic dynamic and a foundation relationship that should be built on something else. But should you be thoughtful? Should you be aware of those high leverage relationships in your life? Absolutely. Is the marginal time or you're asking of advice or being humble with that person, like, should you put that effort in to go do those things? 100%. So I think an awareness of what the high leverage relationships in your life are is key. Once you build some of them on a good organic foundation. And then, as a firm, we are very, very focused on the importance of relationships, especially in an industry where we are partnering with companies for a long duration. And I think it's great to have a culture as well that prioritizes that and supports that. And so, I think that's also a key piece as well. There are teams or cultures in sports that don't prioritize that as much, right? And don't think long-term relationships and don't fundamentally value the relationship more than the marginal dollar, right? Or more than getting ahead or more than anything else. So I think you'll have to have a culture, at the place you're at or in your own home that just prioritizes them. And, there's a great phrase, which I probably don't practice 100% perfectly at all, but it talks about you shouldn't prioritize winning an argument over winning your brother or sister over, right? And it's like, if that is the core foundation in any discussion, it's a good place to be, because like fundamentally you always know, like, I want to win my brother or sister over, not the argument. I should probably apply this to more relationships in my life. This is probably very good advice for being and having a healthy relationship. So I do need to still work on this, but I think it's really applicable in all areas.
It goes back to your earlier point of like, I think like from studying that economics book, you learned that finding common ground and seems to be a recurring pattern. Like that's very fascinating.
My girlfriend would say I still need to implement this advice, but I think in some areas I have. So
I just got a lecture last night, so
it's good to get lectured. We are generally wrong
on being less polarizing on the dinner table.
Yes. Okay. Nice. She probably was right.
Probably. When was the earliest you learned the importance of relationship building? Was it something you inherited, you think, from your grandfather and godfather?
No, I didn't. I think I got a love of people from my family first, and then from my faith. And I got an understanding of people through those two areas. I mentioned through sports, right? And just understanding and being able to deal with people. And then it makes you aware of your own flaws. Like if you're aware of your flaws in sports, then you start having to be aware of all your flaws as a person. And then you just start really becoming like very aware of how terrible you can be at things, right? And so I think it just gives you a patience with people. And therefore you get like a much more of a love for people. So I think that's probably like core foundational. And then I think, as you think about what industry you're in and how to be successful in the industry, you realize that relationships are a critical component of this industry. And then being a part of a firm like 1-7 who has a focus on that from a culture standpoint further amplifies that. So I just think it was all these things that cascaded and helped. I think I've been probably uniquely gifted, which helps me, I think, as an investor. It helps me out, can help our companies that we invest in, and that I get to partner with, in being able to take the diversity, which is a bad word these days, but it still is a good word at its core, at least. But take the diversity of experiences that I've had, diversity of passions. I grew up in so many different places. I'm mixed race. I'm multicultural. I grew up around different types of people. I had incredible different experiences. I spent a chunk of, I talk about my passions for gaming and building computers as a kid and technology, but then I was an athlete for a long time. And so just being comfortable in so many different shoes and rooms has really been a huge advantage in able to have a broad swath of relationships. And I think that's a superpower that I try to apply to help founders that I am able to, hopefully partner with, and being able to open doors across a broad swath of industries to help their business scale faster. And so, I think that's also just back to that point of this upbringing and natural dynamics that I sort of realized later in life that were going to be probably helpful to this part of the trade. Obviously, relationships are just one piece to being successful in venture.
As a first-time founder, or for any first-time founder, what would be your advice on building and managing some of these high-leverage relationships?
I think
one takeaway, as you mentioned, rooted in, actual shared interests beyond work.
Well, I think for founders, right, it's understanding what are the relationships that matter in your trade, let's call it.
Yeah.
Right? So you have two sets of customers that you're selling to for a while. If you're going the venture route, high growth technology, venture backed company route.
Yeah.
You're selling a product to customers. You're selling a product to employees who are going to help you build your company.
Yeah.
And you're selling equity. You're selling another product to investors.
Yeah.
And sometimes, founders can prioritize maybe selling equity more than selling products, which is not a good place to be.
It's a lot of context switching.
Yeah, but that is the reality, right? So you have to think about all these dynamics, and there's no right answer. I think there's opinions and views and things that I've seen work over a short time frame. I'm happy to replicate, happy to introduce you, right, to especially the founders in our portfolio and our network that and operators that have been doing it successfully for decades, and that many look up to. But there's no right formula at all, and each business is very different, and each personality set's very different. But I think at least being aware of these dynamics and when to over-index for one or another, and how to play the game in your own context.
Right. Okay, so I'll push a little bit more here, Christian. You're also founder, Hill and Valley Forum, not a high-growth venture-backed startup, but
yes,
a very consequential forum, bipartisan, to bring people together from different sort of circles. You're hosting an event with the president next week.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm glad this came out yesterday. That's a high leverage relationship, right? When you started out 3-4 years ago, it wasn't this government, right? And you would have had to build relationships that you previously didn't have in DC. So
it's great. I mean,
how did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, the AI summit next week that the Hill and Valley Forum's co-hosting with the All In podcast, and you have a bunch of folks involved that are all actually in the admin, from David Sachs, Jacob Helberg, my co-founder, Michael Kratsios. These people have been incredibly involved in putting this together, and it's gonna be pretty fun. I think that fundamentally you just want to focus on, like I mentioned earlier, what are we actually trying to do? And what we're actually trying to do is extremely unifying, right? Which is, once again, like Hill and Valley Forum is meant to rebuild the bridge between Silicon Valley and Capitol Hill. And I think that mission and mandate extends even further, right? To not just the US government, but our allies, to not just the technology industry, but broader industry. Calvin Coolidge said the business of America is business, right? And I think a successful industry is important for national security, is important for economic growth, for opportunity. And so we get to be a part of that, which is, uniquely bipartisan.
Yeah.
That work needs to be done and is done and led by folks across the aisle. And I think it just naturally sort of lends itself to that dynamic where you're focused on both sides. I mean, the Hill and Valley Forum got started during the Biden administration.
Yeah,
and scaled,
exactly. Yeah.
And scaled during. It was incredibly successful. They were
Yeah.
incredibly supportive. We had folks
Yeah.
from the departments there, and it's continued that trend in this administration, and whatever the next administration is. You know, I think this will continue. I just think we just are very lucky to be in the middle of a trend that really I think is funny, because like trend implies it's a new thing, but like this is where Silicon Valley got started from, right? It's always been this way.
Exactly.
So I think, you know, for us, we're just a part of a blast Back to the Future dynamic, right? Where you know, we're harkening back to the past and rebuilding a bridge, but you know, this is kind of where our beginning started. And so for us, I think the focus is that, and therefore the derivative is you end up really maintaining, having great relationships because you're doing work with folks across the aisle, because what you're working on is consistent, right? Regardless of the admin, regardless of political party, regardless of anything.
To sum it up, choose good quests.
That's exactly right. I mean, Trey's paper is incredible, and I mean, that's exactly right. I think it's easier said than done.
Yeah, like choosing that mission is.
It's easier said than done, but it's one of these things that, you know, if you find a good quest,
the right mission,
it ends up making these things actually a lot easier, because they end up being rallying points. They may not be for a while. You may only be rallying people in a small subset, but if you're right, then, you know, it really ends up being impactful. And so I guess, you know, the answer is like the relationships will come from this derivative of having a rallying thing that makes sense in the right moment.
And my takeaway from this would be that if you pursue the right mission, you will find momentum, and you will find it catching fire, right? And because you care about it, and other people care about it, it's just like very genuinely rooted, and you know, people see that.
It's definitely true. You may be early
to
the trend, right? So it may be only a small subset. Maybe everyone disagrees with you. You know, these things are funny. I mean, Palantir had the right mission, and you know, but they still had to sue their customer, right? And you look today, though, now they're very rallying business that's fully trusted by their customer.
SpaceX as well.
And SpaceX, exact same. So, you know, I think we've seen that in our portfolio and in our ecosystem overall. And I think it's a good reminder in your personal life, right? Anything that you choose. Everyone may not agree with you, but if you choose the right mission, the folks that do will
as long as you
come together. And then I think, you know, over time it can become consensus.
It's also probably some of the learnings from 0 to 1, where, you know, contrarian for a while, but, you know, not zero believers, but also, you know.
Correct. Or else you're just contrarian and wrong. If
zero believers is just contrarian and wrong.
Correct. So 0 to 0 would be that kind of a book.
Yes.
Luckily the book is called 0 to 1.
This is a good takeaway. You talked about, I wanted to pull this thread from earlier, but I wanted to go deeper down on the relationship building piece. You mentioned you like to, you know, work on your flaws, and there's something about, you know, you just get obsessed with it. I don't know whether that's the athlete that comes out, and you have the sort of self-awareness of quadrupling down on the strengths. What is an example of weakness that you identified early on or recently, and what did you do, right?
You know, I'd say like the one weakness that I identified was that I work too hard.
Oh, come on. Give us a real one.
Isn't that the go-to answer, right? You know, I work too hard.
This is hustle porn.
I gotta work harder and not working so hard.
We're not on the Gary Vee show, Christian.
No, there's so many. Oh my God. There's so many.
We don't have to talk about it.
No, I do. It's a great question. I mean, like there's a broad ranging of things that are like things that were skill set weaknesses, right? That I just had to go and develop. I mentioned I took all my basic business courses in school. I was a finance TA, which means nothing for, you know, entry level finance. But I had a huge learning curve coming in, just like every single person does coming into finance, right? And
Right.
especially what we do, where we're underwriting growth stage businesses, we're have a lot more data that we can diligence. We're building out models. We're spending a lot more time understanding not just the product and the market, but also the fundamentals of the business, and then comparing that to comp stats in the public markets. I had to learn a lot. And it turns out that your basic accounting courses that you take for business degrees are not really that useful when it comes time to actually looking at a balance sheet or an income statement or a cash flow statement, and particularly understanding like more advanced nuances around accounting. You have to go like learn that yourself.
What is true
By the way, venture finance is not something that you just come out of school knowing. Like, you don't understand cap tables as complex. You don't understand the different math on financing rounds. You don't know what a safe is coming out. And I spent a lot of time Googling stuff or going to learn stuff after.
Especially early stage venture. It's
no idea any stuff.
It's not finance.
So I had a huge learning curve, and I enjoyed the aspect of just self-teaching yourself. And obviously we had an incredible program for training at 137 as well. But I had to self-teach myself a lot. And you learn a lot of stuff on the go. And so I think, that was something where it's like I spent years of my life like in a meeting. I was like, I have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And but then you go learn it. And that was the key. Is like I was obsessive. Like I never want to be that. I never want that feeling again. Like I do not want to be in a meeting and not know a term or know what was said or actually understand what that. Like never again. And so you can close that gap.
It's a fear of embarrassment.
Yeah, and you can close the gap. Like
that's
it's also
the forcing function.
It's also something you can close the gap. Right. And so like so I think like that is one thing where coming into the venture industry, coming straight into growth, and having skipped, the traditional 1 to 2 year rookie training camp of investment banking, I had to do investment banking on the fly. And so I think like that was incredible. But the takeaway was like, if you don't know something, like most people would sort of be like, I didn't know, and just get back onto it. Like I would immediately on my phone or pull someone aside or go research. Like I would solve that immediately.
You don't want to know that word tomorrow.
Correct. And then so I think that's one. I think strengths also can be weaknesses, right? So I mentioned like this obsession, even what I just said, this obsession with fixing things, doing things immediately and fast. But there's also risks to moving that fast, right? You can make mistakes. You can miss certain things. Maybe within certain decision-making dynamics, you don't want to move as fast. And so
you're not allowing comprehension time.
You're not creating redundancy or risk mitigation right within your own decision-making or your own actions. So I think that's something that definitely think about. I mean, you want to have partners in your life, and you want to build dynamics around you to support your superpower, and then help mitigate your weaknesses. And even all this context, I think you can turn weaknesses into strengths. You can make strengths, superpowers. But like fundamentally, you're not gonna have a superpower in every single one. There's not a single successful person that is that. And I think also society is very much realizing that, like our heroes all throughout time, right? In any dynamic, we're never these perfect people that spiked on every single thing. Like that is the reality. Like that's awesome. Now it's uncomfortable embracing that. So although I'm super aware of that, right? Like how much will I embrace that over the rest of my life? Like we'll see. So,
what's your spiky character superpower?
Well, I have many. And no weaknesses. So, so I think a couple, right? I mentioned I'm incredibly obsessive. So I will want to get something done as fast as possible. I will want to learn something as fast as possible. I am not okay with just skirting by, right? It's like if you're going to learn something, if you're going to go deep into something, like you want to fully understand, you want to become an expert in it, you want to go deep. So I think that obsessive mentality is very helpful as an investor. When you have a ton of context switching, you have to learn about industries you didn't know about, completely learn about technology you didn't know about. I think it's very helpful in our business when you are in the service of founders, right? And you're helping build these companies and you're working with these teams that are giving their lives to this. And as an outside resource beyond just capital, if you can move fast and help companies and keep at the same pace that they are, that's a superpower. I think it helps you not let things slip. right? So it helps you manage a lot of things. If you're obsessive like this, right? If you're not obsessive, then you kind of just can forget things or things can slip. So I think that's a superpower. Like I can manage probably a lot more than the average person because I'm just constantly obsessive and constantly thinking on the hamster wheel. It is a weakness because there's sacrifices in your personal life if you're always like that, right? And so I think like that would be one thing I would highlight. And I think there's certain things that I set out to make superpowers as well early on. I think one of those is I want to be the most helpful investor on a founder's cap table. And it's actually in our firm's ethos as well. So if you look at the entire partnership as a firm, that is also what 137 Ventures wants to do.
Right.
We want to be the most helpful investor on your cap table. If not top 3, we'll survive and live with that. And I think if you talk to the companies we've invested in, and you talk to the companies I have the good fortune of partnering with, they would say that. And even the ones that are our close friends and therefore would also talk about the ways that we probably annoyed them and pissed them off because of that friendship and because they just know us and so they'll see the worst in us. They will definitely say that is definitely our MO. And I think that's a great way to be long-term partners where capital is a commodity.
Yeah. I would have, poked a little deeper, but I do have some other questions.
Yeah.
So we'll keep moving. You brought up like capital is a commodity and being the most helpful is what probably becomes a value add. What is like invention or like in like I guess capital allocation in general? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone.
Yeah. For growth stage, I guess.
I think it's different for everyone. I think people have built entire platforms, right, to service that need and double down on that within market. I don't think there's like it looks like this or this is better than the other. I think it's one of these things like when you see it. And I think founders know it when they see it. I think for us too, not only is it a cultural thing, not only is it an individual personality trait among us as 137 Ventures, but I also think that it's structural because we, unlike most funds, are very comfortable with concentration. We are very concentrated and we invest for the long run and we continually invest. So we like to build positions over time. So these relationships for us are not 15 relationships where we had invested once, right? These are 15 relationships where we maybe have invested in every single opportunity that's come our way, right, over the years of the company, like a SpaceX, for example. Continually compounding in these long-term compounders and durable businesses as a focus. Now, if you're gonna be hyper concentrated, then these companies mean a lot to you, right? And so I think there's a structural dynamic as well, where like the highest leverage thing we can do is help all of our companies because our model is to continually partner with them and continue to see them compound, and they mean a lot to us. Whereas I think if you're investing in 100 companies a year, or you have positions that are sub 10% positions in a fund, it's just a structural dynamic, right? You only have so much bandwidth that you can allocate. Why would you allocate it to one position that is of equal size in a fund and another, et cetera, et cetera? So I think there's also some structural things and just how we think about driving venture returns within the growth industry and our focus on these technology companies in the private markets. So I think it's probably a mix of both.
What is the compounding also happens in personal life? What do you think has compounded for you personally? Looking back, whether it's knowledge or something else.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, I think a couple things have compounded. I mean, one, I think the more experiences you have in life where things work out in spite of maybe your fears or uncertainty, or maybe the season that you were in around them, those are like priors that you can refer to and they give you more confidence in the future, right? So if things have worked out going into something where you were nervous, right, or evidence was to the contrary but you took a bet, that gives you a lot more confidence the next time you have that feeling, and quite frankly you just look past that feeling. So I think compounding of experiences and having priors to rest on give you a lot more confidence in the future, a lot more faith in how things are going to work out, and they influence your decision making. Pattern matching, right, is another example of exactly this. And then I would say that I think the importance of really appreciating how blessed and fortunate I've been in my life has really compounded. As in, like, actually, the older I get and the more things that have happened, the more I look back and just be like, wow, super lucky to have all of these things that made me who I am and are leading to what I'm doing today.
Not taking things for granted.
Yeah, and like it's just I'm more and more appreciative of like I am living in all these things that sort of, you know, led and guided me to become the person I am, to be doing the things that I'm doing. And like you're just very grateful that like you had that opportunity, you had that experience, you had that unique kind of context in your life. And so yeah, I think like I've become more and more appreciative. And I think it's like what every parent wants to hear from their kids as they get older, right? They say thank you more for all the things you did.
Yeah.
And like that's one aspect that has happened, but it's many other things where I'm just like extremely grateful. And I guess it just makes you more humble too. And so but I will say, every time I say that, you know, the best quote ever is, so in the Old Testament, Moses writes about himself, and he says that Moses was the most humble man in the earth, which is amazing to have someone basically say about themselves that they're the most humble guy in the earth, which is like contradictory. So, you know, I think it's increasing humility, but I am definitely not the most humble person in the earth.
Right. So, you know, lean into the nervousness, have more experiences. That builds confidence over time, you know, for decision making, for mental models, where that might end up being. And decision making is everything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As builders, as investors.
Absolutely. This is completely, and you mentioned the personal life, this completely applies to investing, right? And I think that's a big unlock as well early on in your investing career. I was able to, because I had autonomy and because of how 137 Ventures likes to train talent, I got a ton of reps and was able to build a lot of experience and get quick feedbacks. I'm also, another thing I'm grateful for, which I think is also another sort of blessing and luck, beneficiary of timing, was going through the cycle change in 2022 as an investor was extremely impactful because you got to see quicker feedback loops than you normally would have had the cycle continued to the up. And that helped you learn a bit in how you underwrite things that you felt at the time of investment, things you were skeptical on, things you were bullish on. It also gave you confidence because you got to see things perform through that cycle and compound through that cycle. So you also got confidence in like, oh, you were right on this bet. Like this really is a durable business. So that feedback, that cycle change created incredible feedback in decision making that I was able to do, 2020 and 2021 early in my career. So I'm actually very grateful for that, and I think that's something that the next investors may not have. Right? They may have
very unique phenomenon.
10, 15 years before they actually get that feedback on their decision making. Like I got that feedback right away, and my cohort of friends that kind of came up in the industry at that time frame. So I think it's very lucky that time.
Yeah.
And
that's what I was thinking. Very interesting. Yeah, the feedback loop is usually way longer in investing. What's something your investor friends disagree with you on?
I would say that my investor friends disagree with me on portfolio construction. And I think I am much more confident, and we as a firm also hold this belief in the importance of concentration in the funds. And I think I have some that agree with me, but I definitely have a lot that I think, still in practice wouldn't feel comfortable, having large swaths of the funds, in a single position. And so, I think there's still a debate within growth of like what proper portfolio construction should look like. And, I think I'm much more on one side than the other.
Another spin out from the FF sort of mafia has that Giga Fund.
Yeah, I think they're more concentrated than anyone. So they're probably the smartest out of all of us. But yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's funny. Like there's a spectrum for sure, right? Because there's a point where there's too much concentration, right? But my godfather had a great quote, which was that the only way to build wealth is through concentration. And funny that my grandfather had the exact same quote, just different phrasing, which was the only way to build wealth is through ownership. And so it is just a true reality. But at the same time, right, multiples are in return is tied to risk. It's like modern portfolio theory. So
Warren Buffett's best bets were also highly concentrated.
Highly concentrated. The biggest key of Warren Buffett is also duration. He held for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And it turns out like small numbers compounding for a long time deliver incredible returns. I always like bring this up, like most people don't, when you ask people just to do like simple math on this, the S&P's average return more recently has been 9%. 9% compounded over 30 years is about like a 14x. And so it's like, 9%, but over 30 years, you can 14x your money. And so I think also that's the other key is not selling, it turns out, while being concentrated as well. It's just the power of compounding. And I think public markets investors are great to study because you get quick feedback loops, you get a lot of thoughts and decision making, behavioral psychology, and these dynamics around hold periods and concentration, risk management. And I definitely like to apply that a lot more to the private markets. And we as a firm definitely think about risk differently and concentration differently than I think most people do when it comes to portfolio construction and how to do venture or growth stage venture. So that's where I would disagree, I think, with some of my venture friends.
There's
actually I have another one too.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think that everyone right now is extremely excited about investing in aerospace and defense, as they should, but I don't know how dispersed the returns will be from a numbers of companies perspective. So the magnitude of outcome, yes. The returns, yes. Any highly regulated industry tends to concentrate in a handful of winners depending on the category. And so I don't think this will be like enterprise software where there's hundreds and hundreds of.
I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation at the top.
Consolidation, I just think varying degrees of outcome. So like success in a lower multiple industry will look very different. So although they may get to a real scale because there's a real tailwind and trend here.
Is it just defense or hard tech broadly?
I think aerospace, just in particular in defense. Yeah, defense. So it's this weird thing where like we are massive investors in category, care a lot about it, and we will continue to invest in companies. But I don't think the number of outcomes will follow the magnitude. Whereas like in enterprise software was very different, right? Or like it's anything within software and shifts that happen within that, where like there's a market shift with cloud and an unlock. There's obviously a market shift and unlock with AI. That's creating an opportunity for there to be hundreds of large outcomes, and I don't think that's the case in
so this vibe, like almost too late vibe shift to defense 5 years from now in terms of numbers or like DPI is going to look very different.
Well, I just think price is really going to matter. These are low multiple businesses, and so even the ones that work, what price did you actually get in? What price did you pay? And these are businesses where value tends to accrue to the largest players. And so not every company is building one of those type of platforms, right? But that doesn't mean they're going to build a really great business. And I think all the dollars should flow to backing all these entrepreneurs who are working on these really hard problems. But I think there needs to be probably a bit more sensitivity to price, given that success in this industry from a fundamentals perspective will lead to a different sort of market cap or terminal value than other industries. And so you have to be cognizant of that.
Since you brought it up, let's do predictions. Outside of SpaceX and Anduril, what are those top 5 in the private markets across defense and aerospace?
I will just talk about some of our largest positions and make it very easy. But so I think SpaceX, Anduril.
Apart from SpaceX, Anduril.
Look, jokes aside, I think we've gotten to partner with some of these companies. There's many that that are incredible compounders that would otherwise be large cap publicly traded companies.
That's
some
true.
of them will even be in the Max 7. This dynamic of companies staying private
SpaceX
longer
could have very easily been Max 7.
Largest private company in the world, one of the largest businesses in the world. These companies are highly profitable. They're growing faster than anything in the public markets. So all the growth is in this category.
At this point, SpaceX is bigger than NASA and most.
You had the small cap premium move to the private markets post GFC. Right now, you're having the large cap returns all move to the private markets. So, in essence, like I think that entire trend is really exciting, and we're investors in a bunch of these companies, from SpaceX and Anduril to Figma to Applied Tuition. But I think
Applied is emerging. I think that's going to be a big one.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's been it's a newer investment for us. It's been incredible partner with those guys. They're going after a critically important industry that a lot of people are not going after, and they are at real scale. And I think it's awesome because they are not just going. The industries are going after, actually now people are realizing how they're important from a national security perspective. Like the automotive industry, the mining industry, the construction industry, this is all very much tied to this reindustrialization of the West, to deterrence. And that to me is like awesome. Like you don't get to see that right now, right? Everything is very much focused on aerospace and defense, and the Pentagon is sole customer. And right now you're seeing that like, no, like legacy industry also is technology. Legacy industry needs technology. Legacy industry needs to scale and to win for the West to be successful. And so they are, one of the software providers working on making that happen.
And we're in Detroit, they have some of the biggest legacy manufacturers as their customers. What is something your founder friends disagree with you on?
I have a view that I think we've concentrated in cities too much, and I think we need to disperse and spread out more because of cost of living. I think making housing affordable is one of the most high leverage things you can do, and therefore I think it is the most unproductive thing for our economy to just mimetically concentrate in San Francisco, New York, and LA only. And so I am very, very pro starting businesses, scaling businesses in other cities. If you have teams, hybrid, remote work, like I actually think these things are incredibly net positive for the economy. I'm very sympathetic to the importance of office culture, the advantages. Like I don't have a view on what people should do. I just want us to acknowledge that it is extremely important that we get people out of only just moving to these cities. Because unfortunately, we're not solving the housing or cost of living problem. And we've learned a playbook that works and how to scale businesses and have access to talent. Starlink is pretty incredible. You can have fiber speeds in the middle of nowhere, and you can afford housing in a large swath, the majority of America actually. So I would love to see more dispersion of technology, of industry, of companies, and can we spin up new cities, right? Like the last major city that was spun up out of nowhere, like Orlando and Vegas, right? But like, how do we create more major cities, more hubs? So that's like kind of my it's not really a disagreement because I'm not saying I'm like actually like very pro in office culture.
More of a take,
just more of a take of like, hey, actually this is really good for the economy. So like, let's not try to mean revert so hard. And so I think, I somewhat disagree, and I'm not anti-remote work.
Early last year, funny enough, me and my close friends, we went on a road trip across Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, exploring land to build this techno-forward sort of charter city as a way to advance frontier tech. Ended up deciding against it.
Instead, you just moved to Los Angeles, and you completely counteracted my whole point.
Well, I'm still in like the Bay Area, but I am considering moving to Austin.
Austin is a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction.
I'm totally down with Austin. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of my friends, Keith and Delia, maybe completely vehemently disagree with me on this. And it's amazing. Like I actually don't argue. Like
they did try the whole Miami thing, which didn't work out.
I'm like, well, I think I actually like it's not an argument because I actually agree. I'm like, yes, you're absolutely right. Like in-office culture is awesome for certain types of companies, but like
that I also agree with.
I guess the thing is like, one, I think it's net positive for the economy, and then founders right now have options, and you want option in your business. You have options. This is why companies are staying private longer. You have incredible options in the private markets to manage your cap table, control your cap table, make long-term investment decisions, and go after very large outcomes. You can create liquidity and manage liquidity in the private market. So you kind of have this great menu where like you can run your business at scale in the private markets now. You also have this option where you can build teams in so many different ways. You can operate business so many different ways. And so I think founders should just embrace the full menu of options, and each business looks very, very different. and it's net positive if you choose one versus the other as well. It shouldn't be viewed as net negative.
When the team is really tight,
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing you can do for the company.
Correct.
Up until like 30 employees.
Your points are expand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you expand, and then to your point,
you
actually
end up hybrid default.
This is actually a validation of your point that hybrid default is probably not as bad.
You end up hybrid
for companies like this. Yeah.
Maybe it's at 100 employees. Maybe it's at 50.
I think
maybe it's at 5,000.
That scale has changed.
Yeah, exactly.
That scale has changed.
Yes, but at some point you invariably end up hybrid. So it's it's a moot point because
I'm just.
If you're building rockets, like there are some things where you can't be hybrid, you're just maybe have multiple offices, but everyone's in office. But like at some point you just grow outside of that, and like Stripe's a very good business that is not an office culture 24/7.
Do you think like there's a case to be made that innovation has accelerated and will continue to accelerate as private markets grow?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that yes. If you look at the percentage, if you look at R&D as a percentage of revenue within broader industry, it is venture-backed technology companies that spend the most, right? It's these private companies that are spending the most on R&D on a percentage basis. If you look at some of the large big tech companies, it's clear that the private sector and those companies have been at the forefront of R&D, right? They're spending billions of dollars on R&D, and they're actually leading to real breakthroughs. Look at Waymo, right, as an example.
The modern Bell Labs.
From Alphabet. Yeah, 100%. And so I do think that, in essence, the answer is more capital going to technology companies is going to have a derivative effect of more R&D spend on new technologies. Transformers, right, was a derivative R&D spend at Google.
Yes, which is a public company.
Exactly. So I do think that overall, like technology companies, more capital is good. Right. So whether it's the big tech companies who they're just spending capital from revenue, or it's private companies that are spending venture dollars on it, I think that those will continue to be the leaders for innovation, and that's where you see the innovation. That doesn't mean that research doesn't still matter. Right, there's unpatentable research that has to happen that's funded by the government many times that then can lead to breakthroughs. So all these areas do matter, but if you're look at where the scale is and where some of the breakthroughs have been, it's come from technology companies. It's definitely come from within the private markets.
How do you become a great storyteller?
I think if you spend a lot of time. Our job as venture investors is to listen to stories and see if we believe them or not. And so I think you develop an appreciation for what is a good story, for how to underwrite a story, for how to believe in one, how to be wrong about one, how to be right about one. We live in a world of stories. Stories are just assumptions. When we're making investments as a firm, right, we are fundamentally making assumptions about the future. We're taking a worldview. We're believing some story that's going to lead into the numbers, right? These are forecasts, right? Especially for early companies, even in growth. If you're a 10-year-old company, you're still early in your growth curve, right? You're not a 30, 40-year-old business where, maybe I give you a lot more credit for the forecast. Like I'm still having to believe a story that ties to these numbers. So I think that probably is helpful, right? Being around a lot of stories, hearing a lot of stories probably can help make you a better storyteller. And then I also think there's this weird thing of like, there's mental blocks always to these things. So reps, the more you do them, the more comfortable you feel in everything. So I'd say be around a lot of stories and then get a lot of reps telling them, and you'll be terrible at the beginning and it'll get better and better.
Did you ever do debates growing up?
Yeah, I still debate too much.
What are the ingredients of a good debate?
A good debate?
How do you structure a good argument?
For me, a good debate is where I hear new counter arguments that help me learn and grow how to make better arguments. So, what you want is someone to bring a question up that you hadn't heard before, or a counterpoint or a statistic you hadn't known really, and you can then go research it, learn it, and tear it apart, hopefully.
It's boring if you just win the debate.
It's skill sets, right? It's skill sets. So it's like you can't get new skill sets until you get stress tested, right? Like you can't improve your game. You can't improve your knowledge. You can't improve your views unless you have that. Also, by the way, it also may change your view, right? Like you may hear something you didn't know, and it may actually like help you improve. So, I mean, I think that's the best debate. The ones that are terrible are ones that, once again, just become ad hominem attacks, right? Or they become contentious, or like you don't actually get anywhere. You're just fighting. Those are useless. The good ones are ones where you learn something new. And it may be that you get more confident in what you believe, right? That's the best. Like you actually hear something that's a prevailing counter argument that people believe, or prevailing belief, and you realize it's stupid. So that's great. Then you're way more confident in what you believe. But you wouldn't have gotten that unless you heard the other side. Yeah. Or you may be more understanding, or you may realize that you're wrong. So I think those are the best ones.
What's your best cold email that you can share?
I don't know if I have one. I did some cold LinkedIns early on in my career. I don't really know if any were that successful. I'm trying to think. Actually,
this is the moment you brag.
I have one. Actually, I have a funny one. Well, it wasn't that cold though. See, no, it wasn't that cold. I don't know if I have a good like real cold one. Yeah,
it's okay.
I have one where a mutual friend gave me an email.
Oh, that counts. That totally counts. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a really close friend of mine, who's also one of Trey Stevens' best friends, Trey hosted this Zoom. It was a Zoom like Bible study, and during COVID, so 2020. Yeah. And a mutual friend of Trey's was someone that I hadn't known, but I knew of, this guy Dan Wright. Dan Wright at the time was the president of Data Robot before he was the CEO, and
president of
Data Robot.
Okay.
And then before he was the CEO, and we were all on the Zoom together. It was a fun Zoom. It was a bunch of people, tech, and we were discussing plagues and theology and philosophy. And so then at the end of the Zoom, we Dan and I had some good interactions, and it was really cool just seeing someone that shared similar passions in the industry. And I knew of his company. We had talked about like the other day in an investment meeting. And so I asked Trey for his email, just shoot him a note and say, hey, it was great, meeting on a study, and we'll have to connect sometime. And so I just sent him a cold email, and I guess he had some social proof because we had talked recently, and he met Trey. But I just sent him a random email. Dan's become one of my close friends. He's actually the founder of Armada that my partners helped co-found. SpaceX has been involved in day one, and it's a really, really great business that we've had the pleasure of investing as a firm. And so I got a friend and a great company out of that. So yeah,
that's a good one. Well, what are you reading and watching right now?
I'm currently reading. It's funny, actually. I mentioned the Thomas Piketty book. I'm currently reading Alchemy and Finance by George Soros. Once again, someone that I maybe don't hold certain types of views with, but who is one of the best investors of all time, an incredible, interesting thinker. I'm obsessed with games, and I'm obsessed with philosophy, and that drives like why I'm investing in my worldviews. And he's a philosopher at heart. I think if you study a lot of the best investors, they were philosophers at heart, or poker players. And so it's a really interesting book just to understand some of his theories on reflexivity. It's really great theory. He's very much right when it comes to markets. He's really wrong when it comes to society and some other things, in my personal opinion. But it's a great book. Just seeing how someone thinks, seeing some of his thesis that's really spot on, and some of the things that I don't think are probably not as spot on. And he's one of the most successful investors of all time, an incredible thinker. And I do like reading books and listening to people that I maybe generally disagree with on certain things, but probably agree with them a lot on others. So that's one book I'm reading. I am also reading Crashed, which is basically about why the EU countries did so much worse than the US post GFC. It's fascinating. Just started it. It's highly, highly recommended. Very famous book. And so that's a whole other rabbit hole of a fun conversation to go down.
I'll add that to my list for round two.
Yeah, it's a very famous one. So far, so good. So those are the two that I'm reading. What I am watching, I am just starting a little late the Osama bin Laden documentary.
Oh yeah, I've heard great things.
Yeah. So that's good. And I just saw F1 in theaters. Everyone has to go see it in theaters. Incredible experience. Absolutely incredible. You have to go see it in theaters. Yeah, this is like a go to the movies, get popcorn, sick film. So yeah.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Christian, for coming on the show.
Yeah,
This was
thank you.
fun.